can't live by bread alone. Yeah, this word got food in it. Stepping on the devil dome, you should see the bruise in it. Backing out the scripts, told a demon to stand down. Go against the Most High, we gon' see how it pan out. The Father gave me hope, fill me with the ghosts. Now they hate it when I glow. Joseph with the coat, looking for their fruit, but they ain't got no cantaloupe. The Messiah or Belial, you can't be a fan of both. Can't serve two masters. Bread of heaven with the living water, yeah, serving up a truth platter. We ain't idolizing no folly, now we setting up a new standard. When Christ touched down, make the whole earth shake like Bruce Banner. Yeah, bringing them troops to ya. End times getting spookier, warfare getting nuclear, mankind getting goofier. They intoxicated with a wine, damn, she done roofied them. I'm checking every word, spirit doctrine like a proofreader. I hate these Nicolaitans, hate these great Renatos, man, I hate these flipping pagans. Trying to play my father and I hate these imitations. Screaming out Hosanna, we escape that simulation. Better flee to me, vote these or else that lake is where you layin'. Great is he inside of me, casting out this net like I was by the Sea of Galilee. Harvest gon' be plenty, but the laborers are few. Matthew 17 and 20, there ain't nothing we can't do. I can't be no lukewarm, fringes with the blue on. Devil wanna deal, but I told him this ain't Groupon. Praise to the Almighty, you know we gon' sing a new song. Hail the King of King, the Ultra Low, no Jimmy Neutron. If you keep his laws and his commands, then we can fellowship. I don't get with Pharisees and I don't rock with Hellenists. I ain't praising man, cause only Father get my reverence. I'm swimming in the word, it got me feeling like a yellowfin. Yeah, big stepper, Mr. Demon Chin Checker, trying to hear that well done, cause I feel that displeasure. Father pouring out the wrath, and he got a big measure. If it ain't about the kingdom, then I don't give a six letter. You got faith in the Messiah, you got power. I was clean up in that blood just like a shower. Isaiah 5, you were the vine that came out sour, but now we stand and giving glory in this hour. Yeah, we breaking them curses, fleeing the ways of the serpent. Follow his word and pray for discernment, cause they want us laying in hearses. We gotta rise up, raise and resurface. Choose life and stay in your purpose. The price was paid like a merchant, through Christ who came as a servant. See, the kingdom is ready to bag, but yet somehow they chasing a Birkin. After this you ain't getting a chance, while you living you can't but search him. Gotta call on his name like his urchin, never knowing that day is emerging. So repent at the weight of perversions, judgment coming, that thing is for certain. Let's go.
Shalawam, Shalawam family. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, all glory, and all honor to the Most High God, whose name is Yahawah. Of course, I do so in the name of his only begotten Son, Hamashiach Yahawashi, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. It's your brother Yasharahla, House of Bread. And you guys see the title of the video, right? See the title of the video, right? We're about to discuss the ever taboo topic of polygyny. Some people call it polygamy, right? But in all actuality, the Bible teaches the practice of polygyny, right? So look at the word. Poly means multiple, right? And gyny is the root for women, right? Hence gynecology, things of that nature, right? So does the Bible teach, right, polygyny, right? The short answer is yes, right? The Bible teaches that a man can have more than one wife, right? And it's funny because we did a live probably a few months ago. Actually, let me take a look here. Right, Shalawam family. Make sure you guys like and share the video. Right, make sure you guys like and share the video. Right, and I will be putting a link in the chat. So brothers and sisters can click the link. Right, we can have the conversation. Right, we can have more than one or two brothers on at a time. It doesn't matter, right? But I definitely want to dive into this topic, right? The P word comes up in conversation every so often, right? And of course, when it does, you have a lot of sisters who are in an uproar, who are just for some reason triggered by even the concept or the idea of polygyny. And what I've found in my tenure being in the truth, I'm coming up on 7 years, I believe this November. So in a couple of months, it'll be big 7 years for me being in the truth. And to be quite honest with y'all, the people who talk about polygyny the most, right, are people who should not even be engaging in it, right? Typically brothers who ain't really got much going for themselves, things of that nature, right? So we're here to talk about the topic, right? There should not be a question whether it's lawful or not, right? Should not be a question whether it is lawful or not, right? Because what is lawful is spelled out in what? The law of God, right? So again, make sure you guys like and share the video. All right, like and share the video. And we're going to get into it in just a bit, right? When we look at and it's so funny when we're talking about the topic of polygyny, especially amongst the Hebrew Israelite community, the amount of vitriol that the topic gets, right? And the amount of just conjecture and just feelings that are conveyed in these types of conversations is insane, right? Especially when we look at the fact that the entire nation of Israel, right? We Hebrew Israelites, we claim to be descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Israelites, because we are. We would not exist. The children of Israel would not exist without the biblically sanctioned practice of polygyny, right? We see Jacob, he worked 7 years for who? Let's see who's paying attention to their Bibles, right? Who did Jacob work 7 years for initially? Who did Jacob work 7 years for? Which woman did he work 7 years for? No, Nan Franny, that is incorrect. That is indeed incorrect. She said he or she, I'm not sure. No, Lisa, no. He worked. Y'all said Rebecca's sister, all right? Nan Franny said for the sister with the lazy eye, right? Sister Talia got it right. Right. Jacob worked 7 years for Rachel, the younger sister, right? Leah, right? She would be who Nan Franny is talking about, right? So he worked 7 years for Rachel, right? And on the day of his wedding, after they had a ceremony and whatnot, right, he was tricked by his uncle Laban and given Leah, right? He was given Leah. And then he had to work another 7 years for Rachel. So in totality, he worked 14 years for Rachel. Let me tell you something. Rachel must have been the coldest piece ever. One of the coldest pieces ever, right? If I'm going to rank top 5 coldest pieces in the Bible in no particular order, right? Got to put Mama Sarah up there, right? Sarah was so tough. At the age of 90 something, you had Pharaoh, you had the king of, I think it was Jezer, right? Try to take her for him, right? Gotta put her up there, right? Gotta put Rachel in there. Gotta throw Rachel in there. Gotta throw Susanna in there. You had two elders willing to risk it all, right? Wanted to do all manners of evil, right? Because of how beautiful this woman was, right? Of course, gotta throw in Judith, right? And then I have to also throw in Bathsheba. The fact that King David was willing to risk it all for her, she had been the coldest piece. He saw her and said, "Oh yeah, I need her immediately," right? So, like I was saying before, we did a live a few months ago. Actually, let me pull it up really quickly, and I'll share my screen. Did a video on courting, right? On courting and the truth. Let me sign it really quickly. There we go. Again, make sure you guys like and share the video. Right, like and share the video, family. Let me see. So this had to been a minute ago now. So the video that we did here on courting was from May of this year. All right, it's about a little over 3 months ago. Right? A little over 3 months ago. And the video was titled, give me 1 second. Let me go ahead and share my screen. The video was entitled Courting in Truth, Wisdom for Israelite Relationships, right? Right. So in this video, tons of wisdom, right? And what brothers and sisters must understand is that courting is very, very important. The process of courting is very, very important, especially coming into the knowledge of the truth, right? Far too often, you got brothers and sisters not courting, right, for an extended period of time, right? You have brothers and sisters, just coming into the truth, a brand new babe in the truth, and they over here worried about courting and finding a wife or a husband, right? In this video, spoiler alert, right, went into some wisdom that I was able to extrapolate through the Spirit of the Most High from the law, right? In Leviticus, I believe it's the 19th chapter, talks about when we enter into the land, right? When we plant fruit trees in the land, we are to the fruit of that tree, the fruit that tree produces is considered uncircumcised. It's called uncircumcised in the Torah up until the 3rd year. Now, typically a tree does not produce fruit typically until like the 3rd year on average, right? The earliest, depending on the fruit species, is around 2 years, right? But within your first year, a tree is not going to produce fruit. And when we look at the scriptures, the Most High God, of course, through his son, right, teaches us that you shall know a man by his fruit, right? Last time I checked, fruit, they grow on trees, right? And again, when we're looking at the concept of agriculture and trees, right? And we look at how Yahawashi used certain parables, right? He used a lot of agrarian terms in his parables. He talks about how the harvest is plenteous, but the laborers are few. He said that the harvest is white, ready for harvesting, right? Says that you shall know a tree by its fruit. Can good trees bring forth corrupt fruit and vice versa? And the answer is no, right? So when it comes to us being newborn babes, right, who had a seed planted in our mind, right? Yahawashi also gave a parable of the sower sowing the word and the word falling on different types of soil, right? You don't know, right, which brother or sister, what type of soil their mind is, right? You don't know if that seed is going to sprout and create fruit, or whether it's going to sprout, grow, and wither away and die, right? You don't know, right? So the wisdom that we can glean from, of course, again, that's another agricultural term, glean, right? The wisdom that we can glean from the teachings of our King, Hamashiach Yahawashi, and of course the Torah, is that it's probably not the best idea for a brother or sister who's 6, 7, 8 months in the truth to be worrying about and thinking about courting, right? If you're coming into the truth and you are single, you do not have a husband or a wife, right? You should be focusing on the sincere milk, right? Being built up in the spirit and being built up in the scriptures, right? And walking, not just talking, right? Because the scriptures tell us that many are called, few are chosen, right? So, so Forward Focus says, polygyny is definitely lawful, but is it worth it, right? Forward Focus 46. I can't tell from your name. Are you a brother or are you a sister? I want to know, right? That's a good question. Is it worth it? I'm gonna tell you guys, straight like this, right? I have one wife, and being the husband of one wife is hard enough. It's hard enough to be all right. So it's a brother, right? All praise to the Most High, right? So the brother Forward Focus raised a really good question. He said polygyny is definitely lawful, but is it worth it? Right? Great question. It can be, right, if done properly. And what I have found and seen in the Hebrew Israelite community, I've seen a lot of brothers engage in, polygyny incorrectly. I have seen brothers, and I know of brothers who have successful marriages, polygynous marriages, right? And really, when you boil it down, polygyny is simply a man who has multiple monogamous marriages with multiple women, right? Those women aren't, engaging with each other, right? They're not engaging with anyone outside of their husband, right? Because that would be whoredom, that would be adultery, and potentially munchism, right? Let's use that term, right? The term munchism. I think I might have just coined that term, right? So, yes, polygyny is indeed lawful, right? But everything that is lawful, to the brother's question, right? He said, is it worth it? Everything that is lawful is not necessarily expedient, right? Let me actually get that really quickly. Yep, let's go to the book of 1 Corinthians really quickly, and then we're going to dive into the law, obviously, right? 1 Corinthians 6 and verse 12, it says, all things are lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any, right? Now, he's talking about a particular context, right? And he's going on to talking about, as you see right here, meats, right? It says meats for the belly, and the belly for meats, but God shall destroy both it and them. Now the body is not for fornication, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body, right? So in this, right, the body is representing the church, right? And we're saying that the body is not for fornication. Well, what is fornication? This word here is the Greek word porneia, right? Fornication is an unlawful sex act, right? Is polygyny an unlawful sex act? No, it's not, right? However, all things that are lawful may not be expedient, right? Let's look at the word expedient. Expedient, right? Of an action, convenient and practical, all throughout, although possibly improper or immoral. That's one. Means of attaining an end, especially one that is convenient but considered improper or immoral, right? So again, I don't even necessarily like this definition per se, because let's look at some of the synonyms: useful, of use, beneficial, profitable, gainful, effective, right? Practical, pragmatic, strategic, tactical, prudent, wise, right? So these are better synonyms for that word, right? That's translated from Greek into the to the English that we're reading, right? So everything that is lawful is not expedient, not wise. Is it lawful for me to eat 100 cheeseburgers? Sure, it's not unlawful to eat cheeseburgers, right? But is it wise for one to eat 100 cheeseburgers? Right? Is it right? Every year, I think it's what is it? Nathan's. They have a hot dog eating contest. Pause. Right? Is it expedient? Is it wise to participate in a hot dog eating contest and just stuff your face in your stomach with damn hot dogs with glizzies? No, right? It's not, right? It's not a wise thing to do, right? So, depending on your circumstances, depending on your situation, engaging in polygyny, right, may not be expedient, right? It may not be expedient for a brother or a sister, right? I'm going to put a link in the chat, right? Put a link in the chat. Anyone wants to join and join the conversation, by all means, right? Let's talk about it, right? But let's dive into it, right? So let's go to the Torah. Let's dive into the Torah, right? Let's go to the book of Exodus. Exodus chapter 21. No. That's actually not the scripture I want. Give me a second. This is what I'm looking for, right? So let's go to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 21, right? So Deuteronomy chapter 21 and verse 15. It says, if a man have two wives, one beloved and another hated, right? Who had what's another example? What's an example of a situation where you had a man who had two wives, one beloved and one hated? Right? Anyone can think about it? Right? Who in the Bible, see who's paying attention, who in the Bible had a situation where they had one wife that was beloved and another wife that was hated, right? Right, so the brother Adoniah, right? Jacob, right? Jacob had Leah and Rachel, right? He loved Rachel, and as scripture says that he hated Leah, right? And I'm sure he had care for her, right? I'm sure he loved her, right? But he wasn't in love with her as he was in love with Rachel. Like, that's who he desired. That's who he wanted, right? That's who he worked ultimately 14 years for, right? And he got tricked, he got bamboozled into to marrying Leah, right? And the Most High God saw that, you know what I mean, opened up her womb, closed up the womb of of Rachel, right? And most of the children of Israel comes from Leah's womb, right? So we have a precedent for this situation, right? It says, if a man have two wives, one beloved and another hated, and they have borne him children, both the beloved and the hated. And if the firstborn be hers that was hated, then it shall be, when he maketh his sons to inherit that which he hath, that he may not make the son of the beloved wife before the son of the hated, which is indeed firstborn. So let's say, right? So let's just use Jacob for an example, right? Jacob's firstborn is who? Reuben, Ra'awaban, right? Reuben is the firstborn. Reuben is the firstborn of who? Of Leah, right? The hated. The firstborn of the beloved is Joseph, right? Joseph is the firstborn of Rachel. Rachel only had two children birthed of her, that came from her womb, right? Okay, so let's say for hypothetical situations, right? And again, this is before the codification of the Torah, right? Let's say with that situation that Reuben did not commit adultery by sleeping with one of Jacob's concubines, right? I believe it was Zilpah, if I'm not mistaken. Or was it Bilhah? It was Bilhah, right? It was Bilhah, right? So Reuben lay with Bilhah, right? So let's say hypothetically that Reuben did not do that, right? And of course he did not get a curse, right, from our father Jacob, Israel. Then he would not be able to leave the inheritance, right, to Joseph, because he is the firstborn of his beloved wife. He would have to, according to the law, give that inheritance to Reuben, right? Let's read it again. It says, and then it shall be, when he maketh his sons to inherit that which he hath, that he may not make the son of the beloved firstborn before the son of the hated, which is indeed the firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the son of the hated for the firstborn by giving him a double portion of all that he hath, for he is the beginning of his strength, and the right of the firstborn is his, right? So the Torah is about, you know, of course, equity in many instances, right? And it's about righteousness. What is right, right? It's the right of the what? The firstborn, right? You cannot say, oh no, because you're the son of the hated, right? I don't really love your mama like that, right? That now I'm going to make your younger brother, who's not the firstborn, I'm going to make him inherit the double portion. No, right? So here we have in the Torah, we have a stipulation, right? For if a man has more than one wife, right? Now, I think there was a question. Is it okay if I learn a bit of modern Hebrew, even though it's technically more Jewish, or is that bad? So side 23, that's not even a topic right now. Right? It's not the topic. It's nothing wrong with you doing so. It's not bad, nor is it good per se, right? I can't say it's good or bad, right? If you learn it, you learn it. Have at it, right? But let's stick to the topic, right? Again, we got a link in the chat for anyone that wants to join the conversation. Any sister that's just vehemently against polygyny, any brothers, right? There's brothers out there who are vehemently against it. There's a whole organization, right? And they teach that it's unlawful. It's a sin. It is a sin for a man or a woman Not for a woman, for a man to have more than one wife. And here's the problem with that, right? Let's go to the book of Psalms, right? The book of Psalms, Psalm 19, verse 7. It says, the law, the Torah, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of YAHAWAH is sure, making wise the simple. So the law of God, which includes laws, statutes, and commandments, right, is perfect. God don't need your help, right? God does not need you to add anything or diminish aught from it, right? That's actually in the law, right? So let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 2. It's I'll start from the top. It says, now therefore hearken, O Israel, unto the statutes and to the judgments which I teach you, for to do them, that ye may live and go in and possess the land which YAHAWAH, the God of your fathers, giveth you. Ye shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall ye diminish aught from it, that ye may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you. Right. So off rip, the Torah, the commandments that Moses spoke to the children of Israel, they were not his own words. He didn't just make them up, right? The Most High God gave the word, right? Psalm 68:11 says that the Lord gave the word. Great were the company of men that published it, right? Moses was a great man, right? Arguably the second greatest man to ever walk the earth, right? Of course, behind Hamashiach Yahawashi, right? So Moses and even Yahawashi didn't just speak their own words in this context, right? I'm sure Moses spake his own words and his own feelings, right? In his life, right? But in the context of the Torah, right? What we were commanded, what we were given, he didn't make this up. He didn't just pull this out of anywhere, out of thin air. The Most High God gave the word, right? And he was a great man amongst great company who published the word. Now, so tribe of Issachar said, mentioned Solomon having 700 wives and 300 concubines, right? Now, Solomon having that many wives, one could argue that that was a sin, right? And the reason why one could argue that that was a sin is because in Deuteronomy 17, right? Deuteronomy 17 and I'll just start from 15. It says, thou shalt in any wise set him king over thee, whom the Lord thy God shall choose, one from among thy brethren shalt thou set king over thee. Thou mayest not set a stranger over thee, which is not thy brother. But he shall not multiply horses to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt, to the end that he should multiply horses. For as much as the Lord hath said unto you, ye shall henceforth return no more that way. Neither shall he multiply wives to himself, his heart, that his heart turn not away. Neither shall he greatly multiply himself silver and gold. Right. So there are parameters for in which a king is to operate according to the Torah. And King Solomon first, right, messed up, right, by worshiping the gods of many of the women that he married, right, who were not Israelites. If I'm not mistaken, King Solomon's first wife was an Egyptian woman, right? That was not unlawful. But the scripture tells that he also married Zidonians, which are Canaanites. Right? He married Canaanite women, which the law tells us not to do. So he sinned in that regard. Right? Him having more than one wife was not a sin. Him multiplying and having 700 wives and 300 concubines, yeah, that one could argue that that was a sin on Solomon's part, right? But again, the law of God is perfect, right? The law of God is perfect as the scriptures say, converting the soul, right? Your soul is your mind, right? If our minds were focused on keeping the law of God, right? As we see in Psalm chapter 1, my favorite psalm, right? Psalm 1:1 says, "Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law, the Torah of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night." Right? Your mind has to be focused on the law, right? That's important. And again, the law of the Lord is perfect. There's no need for revision. There's no need for adding unto and subtracting. So what brothers and sisters are doing, right, when they say that polygyny is for a man today, because the argument is this: well, it was lawful in the Old Testament, but it's not lawful in the New Testament. And what they're typically going to do is quote one of Paul's epistles, where he's seemingly to them speaking about obeying rules set up by individuals who are over you, right? And they interpret that as being you have to follow the law of the land. There's no Bible verse in the Bible that teaches that you have to obey the law of the land. Because the last time I checked, there was the law of the land not to worship any god other than Nebuchadnezzar in the book of Daniel. And Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, they did not follow that command, right? There was a law, right, of the land not to worship any other god, and Daniel broke that law of the land, right? He worshipped Yahawaah, right? Niggas lined him up. He got thrown in the lion's den for not following the law of the land, right? And Daniel was a righteous man. So that argument is nonsense, because that's not what Paul's even speaking about in that particular verse, right? However, again, the law of God is perfect. It is indeed lawful for a man to have more than one wife, right? Don't believe me? Let's listen to what God said to King David after he committed adultery with Bathsheba, right? Committing adultery, right? If you have a wife and then you try to get another wife, but you end up committing adultery, now that's obviously wrong, right? Because adultery is sleeping with another man's wife, right? Not a man sleeping with another woman. Let's put that out there, right? Because we have this term of adultery that gets thrown around all willy-nilly, right? Of course, then they have created this term cheating, right? And there could be aspects of a brother cheating, right? But in all actuality, it's really him just being dishonest and deceitful, right? A lot of brothers, what they do is they're dishonest and they're deceitful in their pursuit of another wife or another woman, right? Again, that word is interchangeable, especially in the Hebrew language, right? If you're being deceitful, well, then you're sinning, because the scripture tells us not to deal falsely with our brothers and sisters, with our neighbor, right? Not to lie. So in that regard, yes, men can cheat in that aspect, right? But just a man getting another wife, getting another woman, adding a wife, adding, not multiplying, adding a wife, well, then that's not unlawful, right? So let's read this. 2 Samuel chapter 12 and verse 7. Some water. And it reads, "And Nathan said to David, thou art the man." Actually, let's get the context, right? So from the top, right, it says Nathan rebukes David, right? It says, "And the Lord sent Nathan unto David, and he came unto him and said unto him, there are two men in one city, the one rich and the other poor. The rich man had exceeding many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing save one little ewe lamb, which he had bought and nourished up, and grew up together with him, and with his children it did eat of his own meat, and drank of his own cup, and lay in his bosom, and was unto him as a daughter. And there came a traveler unto the rich man, and spared to take of his own flock, of his own herd, to dress for the wayfaring man that was come unto him, but took the poor man's lamb and dressed it for the man that was come to him. And David's anger was greatly kindled against the man. And he said to Nathan, as Yahweh liveth, the man that hath done this thing shall surely die. Right? David's pissed. Like, what? That's messed up what this nigga done did, right? It goes on and says, and he shall restore the lamb fourfold because he did this thing, and because he had no pity. And Nathan said to David, thou art the man. Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, I anointed thee king over Israel, and I delivered thee out of the hand of Saul, and I gave thee thy master's house. Right? Who was David's master? David's master was Saul. It says, I gave you thy master's house, and thy master's wives. Wives. So King Saul had multiple wives, right? King David already had his own wives, right? Had multiple wives. And then when Saul died, the Most High God gave him Saul's wives. Now, obviously, that wouldn't be adultery because these women would be widows, right? As 1 Corinthians 7 tells us, or is it Romans 7? I believe Romans 7, that a woman is under the law of her husband until her husband be dead, right? So even with Abigail's husband died, Nabal, and then she was free to be with David, right? So the Most High God blessed David, right? Exalted him, delivered him out of the hand of Saul. Saul was trying to murder him, right? Gave him Saul's house, gave him Saul's wives, plural, right? And gave thee the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that had been too little, if that wasn't enough for you, David, right? If you wanted more, if you wanted more wives, right? If you wanted more houses, if you wanted more power, right? I would have given you even more. I would have moreover have given unto thee such and such things. Wherefore hast thou despised the commandment of the Lord to do evil in his sight? Thou hast killed Uriah the Hittite with the sword, and hast taken his wife to be thy wife, and hast slain him with the sword of the children of Ammon. So the Most High God knows everything that everyone does, right? But the point of this is that the Most High God is clear on his bounds, right? He's clear on his word, on his instructions. That's why we have the Torah. That's why we have laws, statutes, and commandments, right? Overall, it's the law, right? The whole thing is the law, right? You have individual commands, and then you have statutes, right? Statutes would be, let's say, for instance, if a man committed adultery, what would the statute be? Put to death, right? The commandment is to not commit adultery. The punishment or the statute concerning the punishment thereof is, of course, capital punishment, right? Same thing for the breaking of the Sabbath. Same thing for murder, for grape, right? The same thing for engaging in alternative lifestyles, right? These are all things that are punishable by death according to the law, right? Those punishments are statutes, right? They're part of the statutes. So again, the law of God is perfect. King Chronicles, that is a really good question. Was it lawful for David to sleep with Saul's wife and daughter as long as it was not the daughter's mom? So he would not, according to the law, he would not be able to marry the mother of, I think it was McCall. He would not be able to do so. And of course, we have, we have nothing in the scriptures that alludes to that woman being one of those wives. She could have very well have been Lord knows, right? But that's a great question. Really good question. Right. I love questions like that, right? Questions like, dang, I never even thought about that. Really good question, brother. Right. But again, we can clearly see that the Most High God is clearly for the concept of polygyny. If that's the case, why would God make more women than men on the earth? Why? That wouldn't make sense. Right. And it's funny, right? I was watching I watched Country Wayne skits, and I was watching the skit, and one of the characters, he's he's a hustler, right? And he got, different women in his life. He had 2 baby mamas. Uh, he had a girl. They broke up. He was dealing with another sister, right? He's spinning the block on the other girl and whatnot, and he's having a conversation with his one of the girlfriends, right? The I guess the third girlfriend, so to speak, right? And he's just asking a question. He asked her, like, well, are there more women than men? And she said yes. And he asked a very logical question, right? And again, when we talk about the topic of polygyny, this is a very logical question to ask. If God made more women than men, and if every woman is to have a husband, then how could all the women have husbands if there's not an equal amount of men for those women to have husbands? It would be impossible, right? And because of how we were raised in this Western society, right? We have this Babylonian mindset, right? A lot of brothers and a lot of sisters, right? But in nature, how brothers behave and how brothers act is brothers, they deal with multiple women because it's just in a man's nature. Because again, that's how Most High God wired men. It just is what it is. God made it so that a man is can be with multiple women. He doesn't necessarily have to, right? But a woman is meant to only be with one man. That's just how things were designed, right? It's not expedient for a woman to be dealing with multiple partners for a multiplicity of reasons, right? Hence why the Bible calls that whoredom, right? But the Bible doesn't say a man is a whore or a whoremonger, as many Israelites like to throw around that term when it comes to the topic of polygyny, right? My brother Quad is out. All right, you see what I'm talking about, right? My man D from the West Side, right? So again, the Most High God is not the author of confusion, right? There should be no confusion whether or not polygyny is lawful or not, right? We just read in the law, Deuteronomy 21. Actually, yeah, Deuteronomy 21 and verse 15, right? We read Deuteronomy 21, 15 through 17. There's parameters for if a man has multiple wives, right? So now, right, Exodus chapter 21, right? And let's look at the context, right? And we're going to read it from the top. So it says, now these are the judgments which thou shalt set before them. If thou buy an Hebrew servant, so the context is buying a Hebrew servant, 6 years shall he serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. And if he came in by himself, he shall go out by himself. If he were married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master have given him a wife, and she have borne him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out by himself. If the servant shall plainly say, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free, then his master shall bring him unto the judges. He shall also bring him to the door or unto the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. Right? Talking about a Hebrew servant, right? Context, right? If a man sell his daughter to be a maid servant, she shall not go out as the men servants do, meaning she's not supposed to do what men servants do. She should be chopping wood, right? And all types of stuff like that, right? Building, all types of structures and whatnot. She's not supposed to do what the men servants do, right? If she please not her master, who hath betrothed her to himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. To sell her unto a strange nation, he shall have no power, seeing he hath dealt deceitfully with her. Right? So now he has his maidservant, right? And he decides that he wants to betroth her to himself, right? Oh, I'm going to marry you. And in a situation where he's like, actually, nah, I'm not going to deal with her as a wife, right? I'm not going to actually marry her, right? Then he has to allow her to be redeemed by a kinsman, right? This is talking about a Hebrew servant, right? It says, to sell her unto a strange nation, he shall have no power. I can't sell an Israelite woman to another nation, right? Seeing he have dealt deceitfully with her. And if he have betrothed her unto his son, he shall deal with her after the manner of daughters. If he take him another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage shall he not diminish. Right? So this scripture gets taken out of context a lot of times by sisters, and they'll say, "Oh, you get another wife," because what this is before we go there, right? This is what will happen, right? They'll argue up and down all day that polygyny is unlawful, polygyny is wrong, this, that, and the third, blah, 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 wham, wham, wham. They don't like the concept, right? They don't like the idea. Mind you, typically the people who be having the most animosity, right, have the most animosity against the concept and the practice of polygyny on the sister side, typically be having multiple baby daddies and or multiple partners. So you've had multiple husbands. Now you have an issue with multiple wives. I know of sisters, right? I know of sisters who in the world had no problem being a side chick. Now in the world, now in the truth, they refused. They gonna leave if their husband get another wife, right? So it's quite interesting how this topic gets thrown around within the community, right? So let's continue, right? So this is the context, and this is dealing with a Hebrew servant, right? If I have a Hebrew servant and I betroth her to my son, right? My son, of course, is going to that's his wife, right? He got to provide for her, right? Food, clothing, right? And the duty of marriage is obviously continuing to have relations with her, right? He shall not diminish. And he's not gonna. He can't say, "Nah, I'm not gonna do this anymore." If he do not these things, these and if he do not these three unto her, then she shall go out free without money. So a sister will take this and say, "See, you gotta continue to do blah 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 blah." Right? And if you can't do that, then you can't have another wife. They'll come with all these excuses. The head gets to start bopping, right? Neck start rolling, fingers start snapping, all types of stuff, right? But in context, this is talking about a Hebrew servant. Are you a Hebrew servant, sister? Right? Were you purchased? No, right? But however, right, if a man does get another wife, is he supposed to stop dealing with the first wife? Right? I'm gonna get you a question in a minute, King Chronicles, right? So this right here gets taken out of context, right? But again, we still see right here parameters that or stipulations for if a man takes what? Another wife. Another wife. If it was unlawful, if it was a problem, if it was immoral, why would it be in the Torah, which is perfect, which is the standard of our righteousness? Why would it? It wouldn't, because polygyny is indeed lawful, right? The issue is sisters who grew up in Babylon, this Babylonian mindset, they've been sold this romanticized idea of love, marriage, right? They want the princess treatment, right? Not saying you shouldn't treat a sister like a princess, right? They want the wedding, right? They want all of the glitz and the glam that comes with it, but they're not really ready for being an actual wife, right? See, marriage ain't a wedding, right? Marriage is how you treat your spouse, how you cooperate and work with your spouse. That's marriage, right? That takes hard work, right? That takes dedication, right? And we live in a world where people don't care about the vows that they made. Apparently, a lot of brothers and sisters don't walk down aisles, right, of churches, said vows before God and before man, right? And then they forget those vows and they throw them out the window. And they wonder why their lives are the way that they are, right? But because that's the mindset, that's how we were raised. We know a lot of sisters don't know any better, right? Some brothers don't know any better, right? But again, it's abundantly clear that polygyny is indeed lawful. Again, all things that are lawful are not necessarily expedient. It may not be wise for you, brother, to get shit. Some of you niggas don't need one wife. Some of y'all aren't equipped for one wife. Many of y'all not equipped to be husbands. A lot of you sisters are not equipped or ready or mature enough to be a wife, to be a helpmate. A lot of y'all ain't ready. And right, and this is why listen, if you have not watched this lesson right here on courting, right? If you go to my page, right, go to lives, about 3 months ago, right, did this lesson. Let's talk about courting in truth, wisdom for Israelite relationships. We have to foster better marriages within the community, right? Very important topic, brothers and sisters. If you have not watched this, you should watch this, right? So let's go back into the scriptures, right? Let's go to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 24. Right. So Leviticus chapter 24 and verse 5. This is a scripture that a lot of Hebrew Israelites may not even know is in the Torah. And they don't follow this. A lot of brothers have not followed this. Now, let's just read, right? It says, when a man, Deuteronomy 24 verse 5, when a man have taken a new wife. Let's stop right there. If I have no wife, if I presently have no wife, and then I take a wife, have I taken a new wife? The answer is yes. If I have this wife, and I go and I take another wife, is that other wife a new wife? Why, yes, she is, right? So this applies whether you're monogamous or polygynous, right? If you're currently engaging in monogamy, right, or if you plan on taking on another wife, right? Again, preferably after you've done an extensive courtship, right? You shouldn't just be just adding wives, right, without properly vetting them, right? You gotta use wisdom, right? You gotta use wisdom, right? So it says, when a man have taken a new wife, he shall not go out to war, neither shall he be charged with any business, but he shall be free at home 1 year, and shall what? Cheer up his wife, which he shall have taken. So I know of a couple of situations that I've been made privy to of brothers not doing this. Now, if you take a wife, right? See, this is what happens. This is what happens far too often in the Hebrew Israelite community, right? Because when you're coming into the knowledge of the truth, right? There's like it's hard to find like a community, right? Outside of social media, outside of Facebook, Instagram, and whatnot. Those are probably the primary ones. It's hard to find a community, right? So, right, within community, right? Let's say, for instance, right, I remember when I was in the church, there are a ton of brothers and sisters. Good question, Sister Nazayar. He says, does that mean there should at very least be 1 year with your new wife before getting another? I would say 1000%, right? Because let's think of it like this. And this is why courting is important. Courtship is very important. A lot of brothers and sisters don't court long enough. A lot of brothers and sisters just so ready, just burning in their desires for companionship, for a spouse. They don't properly vet someone, and then they end up in a relationship, in a marriage that's tumultuous, that ain't what it's all cracked to be, right? Because you got this thing called a honeymoon stage. Everything's all good, right, in the beginning. But as time goes on, what happens, right? They start to get on your nerve. They start to you learn things about them that you never knew about, right? And that's because we put on the faces to meet the faces that we meet, right? We put on the faces to meet the faces that we meet. That's the saying, right? When you're meeting someone, you're meeting their representative. You're typically meeting someone when they're on their best behavior, right? So again, courting is very, very important. So brothers, like I said before, a lot of you niggas do not need to be no one's husband. You don't even have the responsibility or the wherewithal to take care of your damn self, let alone a woman and like be her spiritual head, right? Definitely don't need to have another wife, right? And just because you have issues with your current wife is not is not uh an excuse to say, yep, I'm gonna give me another wife, as if that's going to actually make the situation better. It's not, bro. It really isn't, right? But to the sister's question, I would say yes. Like, you should at least, right, be with that wife, right, for a year before you go and add another wife. Because at that point, now you're just trying to add wives, right? And you may be bordering trying to multiply wives. Squeaky clean. You can leave. You can get out of here. How about we just ban you forever? Don't come here anymore. Anyway, Sister Naziar said you start seeing their true colors after 3 years. And you know what? That ties into the lesson that I did on courtship, right? On courtship. In this lesson, I demonstrated how you shall know a tree by its fruit, right? In order to get a tree that produces fruit, you have to plant a seed. That seed has to be watered and cultivated, right? It has to be nourished, has to be given all the proper sunlight, soil, acidity, pH levels, and whatnot. There's a lot of things that go into cultivating, right, fruit, right? And the average tree does not produce fruit within the first 3 years, right? Typically into the third year is when a tree hits maturity and is able to produce fruit. And according to the law, you can't eat of that fruit in the third year. So if men and women likewise are known by their fruit, right, are likened as trees. Trees do not produce fruit typically until the third year. According to the law, you're not to eat of the fruit of a tree in this third year. In the fourth year, it needs to be consecrated to the Lord. And then in the fifth year is when you can freely eat thereof. So the wisdom that I would, me and my wife are expecting our first child, a son. And Yahawah forbid we are still here in Babylon when he is at an age that he can start thinking about marrying, right? I would teach him how to properly vet a woman, right? How to properly court a woman. I wouldn't want my son to make the mistakes that I made as a young man, right? And that's what comes with wisdom, right? Either way, whether he's taking his first wife or second or third, what have you, this law right here applies. Excuse me. What is sin? Sin is the transgression of the law. The word transgression means to cross the line. The law is that line. So the Most High God set a line in the sand that when you take a wife, a new wife, you gotta be home with her for a year and cheer her up, right? But you got a lot of silly niggas in the Israelite community, right? The baser sorts, right? Who they literally treat sisters and the concept of marriage, women as just like straight up servants whose job is to just serve her husband, right? And to make her husband happy. But they never ever talk about how a husband should cheer up his wife, how a husband should treat his wife. They never talk about that. Nigga coming to the truth and they found out that it is lawful for them to have more than one wife. Niggas lose their freaking minds. Niggas lose their minds. Because niggas is not thinking with this head, they're thinking with that head. Right? They're not thinking with the thing between their ears. They're thinking with their little man. And they're all more than one wife in this law. All praises. But did you read this scripture? Did you read this scripture? I bet you didn't. This is very important right here. And this is I've never ever seen this point brought up in a conversation about polygyny. Right? Again, if anyone wants to join it, and let's talk about polygyny, right? There's a link in the chat, right? So I think there was a question. I got Sister Naziar's question. So King Chronicles asks, how do we explain the Bible saying Moses, for the hardness of your heart allows you to divorce, right? Right. Speak that hardness. Matthew 19, right? So start from verse 3, right? So Matthew 19, verse 3 says, the Pharisees also came unto him, tempting him, right? So they were tempting him with this question and saying unto him, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? Right? So what are the Pharisees trying to do? They're trying to trip him up. They're trying to find a reason to bring him up on charges so that they can kill him because they hate him. Right? So that's the context, right? You got to understand that. It goes on to say, and he answered and said unto them, have ye not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this cause shall man leave father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Right? So two individuals, they become one flesh, or they consummate a marriage, and now they're one flesh, right? It says, wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. They said unto him, why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement and put her away? Right? So we're going to get back into Matthew 19, right? But let's go back to Deuteronomy 24 real quick, right? To explain something. So this is where we see the law of divorce, right? Again, good question, King Chronicles. That question about McCall Saul's wives, that was a great question. Great question. So Deuteronomy 24, verse 1, it says, when a man have taken a wife and married her, and it come to pass that she find no favor in his eyes, because he have found some uncleanness. Right? Let's take a look at this word for uncleanness. YAHAWAH, right? Hebrew word YAHAWAH from the root word ira. Let's see what this word means. Ira means to discover, to uncover, to make naked. Make naked, right? So YAHAWAH, right? What does it mean? It says nudity, literally, especially of the pudenda, right? Let's look at what pudenda is. A person's external genitals, especially a woman's, right? So he's found some uncleanness in her, right? And it's going into nudity, right? Nakedness, shame, uncleanness, right? So let's break this down. He's found some uncleanness in her. This is dealing with nudity. So if you have a wife and she's sending nudes to another man, that's uncleanness, right? And what we're going to find out is that Yahawashi is not saying something different from the law. Yahawashi said, think not that I come to destroy the law or the prophets. I come not to destroy, but to fulfill, right? So that means that he did not come to destroy this law. So we have to understand that as a biblical truth, right? If this is true, right, that means that the concept of him changing something cannot be true at the same time. Those two things are mutually exclusive, right? It says, and when she actually it says he found some uncleanness in her, then let him write her a bill of divorcement and give it to her, give it in her hand, and send her out of his house. Then she shall depart out of his house, and she may go and be another man's wife. And if the latter husband hate her, and write her a bill of divorcement, and give it to her, and sendeth her out of his house, or if the latter husband died, which he took her to be his wife, her former husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife after she is defiled. For that is an abomination before the Lord, and thou shalt not cause the land to sin, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. Right. So now let's go back to Yahawashi's words, right? When he's teaching, right? See, Yahawashi, when we look at, for instance, John chapter 1, verse 10. Oops. Okay, God, right. So John chapter 1 and verse 18 says, no man have seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, which is in the bosom of the Father, he have declared him, right? So look at this word for declared. Exojomai, exojomai, right? Declare, tell, right? Recount, rehearse, using Greek writing of the interpretation of things, sacred and divine oracles, dreams, right? So it's the interpretation. So Yahawashi came to declare the Father, right? Declare the Father's words, right? And the first principles of the oracles of the words of God are found in the Torah, right? It came from God, given to Moses, given to us, right? So with that said, Yahawashi is just showing you how to practically keep the law of God. I'll give you another example. There's a situation where I forget if it was the Sadducees or the Pharisees, where Yahawashi says, which one of you having a son and needing to circumcise, I'm roughly paraphrasing, right? And it's on the 8th day. Is that a work? Right? You circumcising, is that a work? Are you not going to circumcise your son on the 8th day because it's the Sabbath? That wouldn't make sense, right? You're not going to break a law, right? You're not circumcising your son on the Sabbath, right? He's using their logic against them, right? No, you're going to circumcise your son, whether it's the Sabbath or not, right? All praise to the Most High, right? We're expecting a son, right? And all well, and we'll be having a brother circumcise him on the 8th day. Okay, I had to travel up to New York City in order for that to happen, right? If it happens to be on the Sabbath, I have to do that, right? Must do that. My son has to be circumcised on the 8th day, right? So coming back here in Matthew chapter 19, right? In verse 7 says, they said unto him, why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement and to put her away? He saith unto them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication. Except it be for fornication. I want to see something really quickly. Uncleanness. Let's see what this word is. Praise. How's he found? Never mind, right? So back here in Matthew chapter 19 and verse 8, it says, he said unto them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives, but from the beginning was not so. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, right, and shall marry another, committeth adultery, and whoso marrieth her which is put away doth commit adultery, right? So now in this situation, you got 3 adulterers, right? And this is why bills of divorce, right, need to be legitimate. You cannot put a woman away for anything save fornication. And what is fornication? An unlawful sex act, right? Adultery specifically is when a man sleeps with another man's woman, has sexual intercourse with another man's wife, right? If a woman is sending nudes to another man, right? She's kissing and or engaging in oral relations with another man, right? That's not her husband, right? That would 1000% fall under Deuteronomy 24. Right? This is uncleanness, right? The word for uncleanness, as we saw, YAHAWAH, which deals with nudity, shame. How shameful would it be if your wife is giving a gut 3000 to another brother? Right? There was a situation in a camp, right, where there was a brother, right, committed adultery with another brother's wife in the congregation, and they exposed it. They exposed everything in front of the congregation, right? And that was the right thing to do, right? The scripture tells us to rebuke people, especially in situations like this, rebuke them openly so that others will fear, right? So truly, Yahawashi is not saying anything different than Moses, right? He's saying you can't put a woman away for anything other than fornication. You can't put a woman away because she doesn't cut the crust off your damn sandwich like you like, or she can't cook, or something silly like that, right? Listen, my mom is one of the best cooks I ever met. My mom can cook, can throw down, right? I learned how to cook from my mom. But my mom did not learn how to really cook until she was married to my father. So would it have been all right for my dad to just divorce because she can't cook? No, that would be asinine, right? And again, when we look at Matthew 19, the Pharisees are trying to find a charge, something to charge him with. You say, see, he said this, and this is against what Moses said. Yeah, let's off with his head. That's what they were trying to do, right? So hope that answers your question, brother. What about flirting? I wouldn't that that's definitely shameful, right? But it's not necessarily nudity involved with that. Again, that's a really tricky situation. Like, sister should be flirting with no other man, point blank, period. But you know, that definitely has to be corrected and rebuked, right? Still quiet's out crazy. I asked for scrambled eggs, and she brought me back sunny side up. She's getting put out. That's hilarious. You're a cloud out, right? So all praise to the Most High. So Sister Kai says that there's so much talk about how to be a wife, but not towards brothers in terms of how to be a husband. Very, very true. A lot of brothers don't know how to be husbands, right? Let's actually something inside rack I want to get real quick. So yeah, let's go on, right? So go to the book of Sirach. Sirach chapter 4, verse 30. Watch this. Sirach chapter 4. This is one thing that is hard about reading the book of Sirach, is that every time I go to a point, it be so much above or below that's just like good gems that it's hard to like know where to start, right? All right, I'm gonna start from verse 29. It says, "Be not hasty in thy tongue, and in thy deeds slack and remiss." Right? Don't be quick to run your mouth and slow to back up your words with action. Right? That's good advice for anyone, man or woman, right? Obviously, Sirach is, the wisdom compiled by a grandson of his father and his father and his grandfather, right? And so this is wisdom, this is gain that was passed down from generation to generation, right? It says, "Be not as a lion in thy house, nor frantic among thy servants. Let not thy hand be stretched out to receive, and shut when thou shalt repay." Right? You don't want to be a lion in your house. And some brothers can do that. I'm not saying don't be stern, don't be, strong, don't put your foot down, right? I'm not saying that. But some brothers, right, they're gonna roar just because they can roar. Don't do You shouldn't do that. Like, it's not making anything better, right? Be not a lion in thy house, nor frantic among thy servants, right? Let's go to the book of Ephesians chapter 5. Right? And we went over all of this in the courting lesson, right? Right, Ephesians chapter 5. I'm gonna start from verse 20, right? So it says, "Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, and he is the savior of the body." Right? So I'm starting here because, again, the Yahawashi is being spoken of, right? He's the standard. He is the head of the church, right? And the savior of the entire body, right? Of believers, of Israelite believers, for the record. Right, verse 24, "Therefore, as the church is subject unto Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands, not to another man, to your own husband, in everything. Husbands, love your wives, even as." So just like Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it, that he may sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it unto himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. So ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loveth himself. I also did a lesson on the truth about abuse in the Israelite community. Right? Domestic violence in the Hebrew Israelite community. It's something that happens. Right? And though it's frowned down upon, you got a lot of these so-called elders, right, who operate from the silly ass mindset of, oh, a woman needs permission from her husband to get judgment from the judges. I never read that, not once in the Torah. Right? But again, going to Ephesians 5, husbands, you gotta love your wives as your house shall love the church. He died for the church. He didn't abuse the church. He didn't slap the church upside his head, right? He took on a grievous punishment for the church, for us. So as he did that for the bride, which is the church, a husband should follow Yahawashi's footsteps in loving his wife as Yahawashi loved the church, right? That's why it says, "So ought men to love their wives as their own bodies." You're not going to beat yourself up. You're not going to give yourself a black eye, right? Why would you do that to your wife that you're supposed to love, right? He that loveth his wife loveth himself. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourisheth and cherisheth it, even as the Lord the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. Right? For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall be joined unto his wife, and they two shall be what? One flesh. Right? So that's important, right? You got to be able to not be a lion in your household, right? You have to love your wife as Yahawashi love the church, right? And love her as you love your own body. Very, very simple, right? But a lot of brothers don't understand that and wonder why they have the problems that they have. So says side 23 says, what if you met her before the truth through long distance and you both decided not to do stuff until marriage before the truth? Does that still I don't understand your question. You got to reiterate that question, re-ask that in a different way. Shamar just answered the question. I just answered this question, right? Just want to go back, right? Any other questions? But yeah, man, polygyny is definitely lawful. Right? It's definitely sanctioned. Great question. Great question. So Judah 9mm said, what's the right way to live with multiple wives? Separately or under the same roof if it works? See, me personally, right? I personally don't see I don't see why someone would have engage in polygyny, have multiple wives, living in different places, right? That's just my opinion, right? There are brothers that actually, I'll preface it this way, right? I have only seen three examples of what I would call what I would say are successful polygynous situations, right? I only seen three brothers, right? Shout out to my brother Deacon from Genesis. Shout out to my brother Conowar. And shout out to the brother Yarash. Those are the only three brothers that I have personally seen, right? Deal with polygyny and it be successful and it be, fruitful. I think Deacon had like his eighth child, right? I think Deacon has with three wives. I know my brother Conowar has three wives, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe my brother Yaraj has three wives, right? I've seen other brothers try to deal with polygyny and have all types of issues. I had a brother, well, not a brother. I had a sister reach out to me, all right, for counsel in a situation between her and her husband. Of course, I'm not gonna give their names and all like that. And in getting some of the details of what they were dealing with, right? The brother was dealing with polygyny, but was not doing things properly, right? From what I gathered, right? Me personally, if I was to get another wife, right, we would live in the same house, we would live in the same house. Again, if you got it like that, right? If you have it where you could, you mean you got multiple wives and they all live in different houses, right? In the same city. Okay, bro. Cool. Makes sense, right? I think what would be the most ideal situation, right? Because if we look at a biblical example, right? In the book of Genesis, we read about Jacob, right? And Rachel, Leah, Zilpah, and Bilhah. Those were the handmaids, the last two, right? They dwelt in tents. They dwelt in tents. And they all had their own tent. And they will all have their night with Jacob, right? Because as a husband, you have to have that duty of marriage. You have to do your marriage, right? So, you know what I mean? One could argue that, oh, having one house and everyone had their own room and things of that nature, that could work. I would think in terms of just trying to keep the law to the as perfect as possible, right? You would at least need to set something up where you have a place where when your wife is on her menstrual and she's unclean, that she can go somewhere else, right? So you can have more than one wife living in different houses, and if you got the bread. I think the most ideal situation is if you had like your own land, right? And you built a main house, and let's say you built an additional house, right, where they could go and be unclean during their time separation. Sometimes women they'll be unclean at the same time, right? They'll be on their cycle at the same time. So that's the situation. Then you would need another place, right? So you know it really just depends. But what I will say is that Deuteronomy 24:5 ain't being kept by a lot of brothers, right? Brother he got a wife over here in Louisiana. And then 6 months later, he's gonna go get him another wife over in, I don't know, damn California or Alabama, some shit like that, right? And he spent a year with that one wife, that new wife that he took, right, cheering her up. Now, my question then is, if you have a wife living in another state, right? You have a wife living in another state, and then whether you have one wife or not, right, applies in both situations. What's like, how can you keep this law, right, and continue to be a husband, all right, continue to have your duty of marriage to your other wife, right, to your first wife, if your other wife lives in another state? That don't make sense. That don't make sense whatsoever. Right? Let's see. So me and my partner on this. So I'm not sure if you're a woman or a male, but when you engage in intercourse, that's the consummation of a marriage. Sex is marriage. Lawful sex is marriage, right? Fornication is sex before marriage is not fornication, right? Fornication is an unlawful sexual act. So just even in your question, you guys agreed not to do anything sexual until marriage. That could not in any case be fornication per se, right? So no, right? What y'all should do is y'all should definitely court, right? Is this brother or sister in the truth as well? That'll be my next question to you. My wife raised a great question. Also, what's the plan for Jacob's trouble if your wives are scattered throughout the states? That doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense, right? To have one wife living over here, this one living all the way over here in a different state. How you going to protect that wife? Right? How you going to have a wife in Georgia and a wife in New York? What sense does that make? How's that going to work? How is that going to work? It's going to be terrible, right? Imagine I had a wife over in damn California. All hell break loose. How am I going to be a husband and protect my wife when I'm all the way over here and she's in Philadelphia and she's all the way in California? It don't make sense, right? But again, like I said, brothers don't be. I'm pretty sure a lot of brothers had no clue that this was in the Torah. A lot of brothers. Because guess what? Until I found this a few months ago, listen, I would have sworn I never read this before. To me, I've read the book of Deuteronomy several times, right? But I don't remember ever reading this until as I was studying one day. I forgot what even led me here. I think I was dealing with it's funny. I literally right after I rediscovered this verse, I had to counsel a sister on a situation similar to this. Like a lot of brothers just not thinking with this head, thinking with that head, don't even think about this. They don't. Niggas are so worried about, oh, I could have more than one wife. Oh, I'm an Israelite. I'm a king. I'm a god. I'm a this. I'm a that. And they actually haven't really soaked up the milk, right? The sincere milk, the first principles of the oracles of God. They have not, of course, given their mind to the law, right? And they're not necessarily operating with wisdom. And the law is our wisdom and our understanding the side of the nations. And the law of God is perfect. That's supposed to add unto it, and that's supposed to just diminish all thereof. What God gave us is perfect. And if you haven't given your mind to the law of the Lord, right? If your delight is not in the law of the Lord, and you're not meditating on it day and night, this is how you skip over things like this, right? When you're just thinking with your flesh and not thinking in the spirit, the law is spiritual. Yahawashi says, the words that I speak to you, they are spirit and they are life. And Yahawashi taught the law. If you're not giving your mind to that, then you're gonna not even see stuff like this, right? And you're not even gonna be able to keep this properly because you're not thinking using wisdom and using this head, but you're using that head. And that's the problem. King Chronicles, I wouldn't say that, no. So let's take a look at let me look at another translation. NLT, right? A newly married man must not be drafted into the army or be given any official responsibilities. So let's say, for instance, you are a priest, right? You're a priest, right? You more than likely would not be called to serve in the temple, right? Let's say if you're a priest, you're living in a suburb in a land of Naphtali. You got to travel down to Jerusalem, right? Or before the temple was established in Jerusalem, you got to travel to Shiloh, right? I forget where's Shiloh at. Shiloh, city. Modern day West Bank. Shiloh has been positively identified with Kiboret Siloam, right? Tell Shiloh, right? So Maps. Directions. Let's say you live up in Hebron. Hebron. So from Hebron to where Shiloh is, right here, where we see this little pin. We got Hebron right here, and we got what they call Bet Shemesh, right? This is where Shiloh would have been. That takes 11 hours walking, right? Let's say you lived up in damn, I don't know. Let's say you lived up near Nazareth. That would take you a day to walk. 33 hours to walk. And you got mountains, all types of terrain, right? That would take a long time, right? So yeah, I would think that would be a situation. I wouldn't say this is talking about regular business. This is also right. This is also not talking about you not going to camp, right? What niggas would do, niggas would say, "Oh yeah, I'm trying to keep Deuteronomy 24:5. I took a wife, so I'm not gonna go to camp for a year." No, that's not an excuse, my brother. Sister Nancy said, I had a brother tell me that it's okay to get another wife if the man is struggling to provide for his family financially, just so she can work and help give him money. Yeah, a lot of brothers are sick in the head. Sick in the head. If you are struggling to provide, right? If you're struggling financially, that says that you have some problems that you need to figure out. Getting another wife is not the solution to that. That doesn't that's insane. Major red flag. Any niggas talking like this, you should not take that nigga seriously. You know what, King Chronicles? I don't know. I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I have no clue. I know High Priest is commanded to take a virgin, right? She has to be a virgin. She can't be a widow. She can't be a woman that was put away. She has to be a virgin. I don't know. Like, I would assume that, of course, the high priest would more than likely live around the temple. So his wife would be close by anyway. So I'm not too sure, honestly. I'm not too sure. Right. Any other questions? We're gonna try to make this a shorter live. My lives be going 3+ hours sometimes. How did Elijah ask John fulfill Micah 4:6? That's all right. 49-10. Sirach 48:9-10. 8, 9 to 10. Sirach 48, 9 through 10. It reads, who has taken up in a whirlwind of fire and a chariot of fiery horses, who has ordained them for reproofs. In a whirlwind, chariot of fiery horses, who was ordained for reproofs in their time to pass by the wrath of the Lord's judgment for the prophetic fury, and to turn the heart of the Father unto the Son, restore the tribes of Jacob. And then you're asking about Micah. Micah chapter 4, verse 6. You said Micah chapter 4 and verse 6. Micah 4 and 6 says, in that day, saith the Lord, I will assemble her that halteth, and I will gather her that is driven out, and her that I have afflicted. I don't know what John and John the Baptist and Elijah have to do with Micah 4 and 10. Sirach 48 and 9. So this is not Sirach's not a prophecy. So can't fulfill anything in Sirach. Right? This is when we're looking at these chapters, right? Some of these latter chapters in Sirach, the author is just commending good examples of individuals that we have in the scripture. So he's talking about Elijah. Verse 9 says, who was taken up. So Elijah was taken up in a whirlwind of fire and in a chariot of fire of fiery horses, right? Who was ordained for reproofs in their times, to pacify the wrath of the Lord's judgment before it broke forth into fury, and to turn the heart of the Father unto the Son, to restore the tribes of Jacob. That's not, like I said, that's not a prophecy, so there's no fulfilling of that. Oh, Malachi 4 and 6. You put Micah. Okay, gotcha. Malachi chapter 4 and 6. Malachi 4 and 6. Burn them up. All right, so this. So it says, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. So Yahawashi lets us know that if you can receive this is Elias. This is Elijah who was to come, right? So God saying at this time through Malachi that I'm going to send you Elijah the prophet. Elijah had already been dead, right? Sirach chapter 48 is talking about the man Elijah as he was Elijah in that incarnation as Elijah, right? Malachi is prophesying, right? And we read about Elijah in what, 2 Kings, right? If I'm not mistaken, right? That's history, right? Obviously, Elijah was a prophet, right? By the time we had Malachi is prophesying that how the Most High God is going to send Elijah. Sending who? Israel. He's going to send Israel Elijah, the prophet, before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, right? So the Most High God sent Elijah in John the Baptist before what? Before that great and terrible day where Jerusalem was destroyed, right? In 70 AD. It says, and shall turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse, right? So what was John the Baptist doing? He was baptizing many, right? Preparing the way for who? For Yahawashi to come, right? Who, of course, would further the work, right? Then, right, depending on how you look at it, okay, so you say, I know, but where did Elijah return sons to their fathers? It just says that in verse 10 says, who is Elijah? Was ordained. He was ordained for reproofs in their times to pacify the wrath of the Lord before it break forth into fury, and to turn the heart of the father unto the son, to restore the tribes of Jacob. Now, funny enough, the book of Sirach was written in Alexandria, Egypt. The tribes of Jacob were not restored. So this is not saying that this happened in Sirach chapter 46 and 48 verse 10. Right? But yeah, this is John the Baptist did that, right? And I believe that Elijah would come back on the earth before the next great and terrible day of the Lord, right? To turn the hearts of the children to their fathers, right? And that being, of course, was coming back, giving the law, statutes, commandments. The law tells us to honor your mother and your father, so that your days be long upon the earth, right? We have to honor the covenant that our forefathers made with our God, right? So, yeah. Judah 9mm says, should you have to pay a dowry to a man if you want to marry his daughter? Only if she's a virgin. You don't pay dowries for virgins. No, King Chronicles. No. This prophet, right? Turning the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers it's just an idiom. It's simply an idiom, right? It's just restoring the nation. It's restoring the family of Israel. Israel is a nation made up of different tribes, made up of different families, but collectively the entire nation is one family, right? So this is just an idiom. You're looking at it too literal. Any other questions? Any other questions on the topic? Nope. All praise to the Most High. And with that, I want to give all praises, all glory, and all honor to the Most High God, whose name is YAHAWAH. Of course, I do so in the name of His only begotten Son, of Mashiach Yahawashi, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. Till next time, Shalawam and Matawathya.